My name is Jamie Purcell. I am the Executive Director of the Wyoming Food for Thought Project, and our mission is to cultivate community through partnerships and programs and create a mechanism for everyone in our community to have equitable access to good and healthy food year-round. We are sitting in one of 5 greenhouses that Wyoming Food for Thought Project has, and we started 6.5 years ago, almost 7 years ago in October. And you know, there were already a bunch of food pantries and a bunch of food banks, but we saw a need still in our community. So there's been a lot of studies that have been released, and they all correlate pretty same numbers wise, showing kids in Natrona County, there's about 3,000 that suffer from food insecurity. Yeah, it's kind of wild, right? There's about 12,000 kids in the district, so that's like 1 in 4 kids in the school district are going hungry. Wow. Food insecurity means they don't know where they're eating at least 2 to 3 times a week.
The public perception is that poverty is caused by lazy people. For you, where does, in your experience, where does poverty come from? Or where do the people that are in poverty come from? So
just a really quick, for instance, like, why do lots of people who win the lottery burn through the money? Because they're not, like, they're not used to having $1 million, right? Like, there's a really good blog post somewhere on the internet about why people who grew up in poverty can't hold on to money. And basically it's because they're just not used to having it. So when they have it, it's like, oh, I have to spend this because I don't know when I'm going to have it again. So the quick answer is poverty is cyclic and generational. So if your parents grew up in poverty, you're highly likely to live in poverty as well. Mm-hmm. Partly because you really don't understand what it's like to not live in poverty. So beyond that, I think that the unfortunate thing is I think that our society has a big us versus them, right? Oh, those people, they, and they lose like the fact that we are all of them together. And so, like, North Casper, like, you've been in North Casper before. You've been here before, haven't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, for lots of people who've grown up in Casper, like, getting them to cross the interstate into this neighborhood is really challenging. But the thing is, like, this neighborhood is the up-and-coming neighborhood. Like, it's where you can get a house and flip it and make it something really amazing for not hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's where kids are still playing in the street at night and still playing basketball with each other and still riding their bikes, and you don't see that in very many neighborhoods anymore.
So there's a lot of community in North Casper compared to when you talk about them playing in the streets and shooting hoops and stuff like that. That's things that, you know, we probably did as kids because we didn't have the technology of tablets, and, you know, Game Boys were introduced probably when I was a junior high or something. So we're not stuck in front of a tablet or a phone or anything, and these kids aren't. So they're actually getting a good sense of community then.
Right, yeah. And that's not to say that they don't have technology, no kids in North Casper, but for some reason this neighborhood, like, has community down. I don't really know what the answer is. But circling back to the whole poverty thing, like, I think, for lack of a better way to say it, it's an us versus them. And then the other piece of it is there aren't that many employers who have enough patience to give folks who've grown up in poverty multiple chances. Because for most people who grow up in poverty, that's what they need, is multiple chances. So there's another, there's a documentary that just came out. Roy Choi, who's a chef from LA, is doing it on, oh man, I'm gonna have to look it up and I'll send it to you. But he's going to all these different places in LA and finding out, like, there's a pizzeria and there's a woman who runs it, and she specifically targets kids from the neighborhood, and she gives them multiple chances. She doesn't kick them out the first time, you know, they come to work drunk or high or whatever. And the reason is because she grew up in that neighborhood and she understands the importance of loving someone first. And I think truly, like, going back to that we versus us versus them thing, right? The us versus them, like, where's that love?
Right.
You have it for the us, but you really don't have it for the them. But if you can, like, shift everyone, and I know that's, like, totally dreamland, but the dream is, like, that everyone shifts to that we, right? Then it doesn't matter who it is. You try really hard to see them as, like, an equal. as a neighbor. But truthfully, I think that that's where the poverty lies. Like, even more than the financial poverty, it's like the cultural poverty that we have.
Because poverty, you say it's cyclical and generational, you know, generations after. From your perspective, what is the best path for somebody to get out of poverty if they're born into it?
Education.
Education.
And the motivation for upward mobility, but I think that motivation does not only come from within, but it has to come from people around you wanting you to succeed and helping you to succeed. And so even like the second chances or third or fourth chances, like all of those things help people rise up.
That's perfect. So now if you're born into poverty, getting an education is much more difficult than just going and getting an education. So if we take away the education aspect, you know, how do you see somebody not being poor if they can't get an education?
Well, the beautiful thing is we all live in the United States of America, and technically everyone is entitled to a free public education through 12th grade, right? Right. So that alone is huge. If you can graduate high school, that alone is huge. So circling back to our food bags, right? When we started, there were about 170 kids on the program through the district before we took it over. There's 3,000, like I said, in Natrona County who are food insecure. You know, some of those kids as parents do go to food pantries, and some of them are on SNAP, but there's still those kids who are falling through what we call holes in the hunger safety net. And so, excuse me, we've hit 800 kids before during a weekend that we serve to. So we're really trying to like look at those like holes, or those like what your gaps really, I think, is that issue of what's stopping people. Like they're hitting gaps. So maybe their family is on SNAP, but they only get a certain amount, right? And maybe there's 5 kids, and we all know how much kids eat. And maybe they don't know how to garden, or maybe they don't have the understanding of how to grow food yet, or put it away even if they can grow it. And maybe maybe they work 2 or 3 jobs, and so getting to the food pantry is also like impossible, because most food pantries are only open during the day for a few hours in the morning and the afternoon, right? I mean, they're just hitting barrier after barrier. And so how do they rise above it? They have to find ways to either jump over those barriers, or new organizations have to say, that way hasn't worked. How are we going to change it so that this way can help them?
What's the best way for like an individual like me, Zach, or Steven to help?
You can plant a garden in your front yard and just share it with anybody you know. You can think about what you have knowledge of and figure out how to share that. Like your music, like that's amazing when you go and you play at community events. Like you're just singing your song, but you're creating like an atmosphere where everyone like is feeling the music. And when that happens, at least from my perspective, then you're more able to relate to someone. Sometimes you can sit down at David Street Station with your food and start talking to your neighbor. Maybe you wouldn't have done that if there hadn't been music up there, right? You work with kids, like you brought them to here and you did a service project, and like getting kids to think outside of the box is huge, and they don't really have as many opportunities as one would think they would, right? I mean, kids don't understand how amazing their life is until they're adults. And then they're like, man, I wish I was a kid again, but you don't get to go back.
No.
So recognizing, like, you know what you wish you could have done. So if you can take those gifts and that knowledge and help the next generation, then even if those kids that you're serving right now may not live in poverty, they're going to be able to have a broader understanding of what their community is, and then hopefully maybe help somebody else. If you hear about a policy, like Casper just passed this stupid ordinance where it's illegal to camp within the city of Casper.
Well, that's like a direct hit.
I know, like, who is that affecting me? Is that affecting you?
No way.
No, who's it affecting?
Homeless, right?
Right. So if you hear about that, even if you weren't at the city council meeting, if you hear about that and you're like, what? You can, put it on your Facebook page and encourage everyone to contact whomever made that ridiculous decision and be like, maybe we should think about reversing that, and here's why. So if you have a voice to use, you should use it.
So what would you say to the people that have obviously never encountered poverty firsthand or even secondhand because they don't understand it, when they say that they don't want to see homeless people walking the street or homeless people living in their cars in parking lots or on the streets, how do you get them to change their mind on it?
That's a really good question, because I am sometimes as guilty of that as someone else, right? Like, you see someone walking, and like I saw somebody today, and I'm like, you can kind of tell they're homeless, and she was smoking, and I automatically went to that judgy, well, why on earth is she buying cigarettes, and blah, blah, blah.
And we all get like that.
Right? It's just so easy to do. Well, if that was me, well, of course that's not me. And so of course I get to judge because it's not me. I think that the best tool for that is to just again, to me, it all comes back to community and just talking to your neighbor. And so maybe you're not going to talk to that homeless person. And you know your limits, whatever those may be, right? Mm-hmm. But you can talk to your neighbor and you can have these dialogues. And so even if you may not feel like you're directly affecting this homeless person over here in this parking lot, at least you're having a conversation about like, well, why do you think that does bother you? And what do you think we could do about it? And just even asking those questions is hugely helpful.
Well, we actually just had a discussion on this last week. We were talking about the stigma of like how you'll see that person paying for their groceries with EBT and they got the newest iPhone, or you see someone in some really nice clothes. Well, it could be that, maybe they went down to the Salvation Army and someone had dropped their size off in those clothes. And I got to thinking like, wow, I've taken, like Under Armour or like Nike or Reebok and taken them down to the Salvation Army and stuff, and maybe that person grabbed them.
Right.
Cell phone, maybe their family can't financially, pay their rent or pay their car payment, but maybe they can add them onto their cell phone,
right,
plan, so they got the phone and they can afford that. Or maybe they got grandparents or parents that can pay their car payments. That's why they have a decent one, because some parents are very fortunate to be financially stable at that point in their life, that they still want you to try to work to where you're trying to go, but you may have children and those are their grandkids, so they may help you out with that car payment.
Mm-hmm.
And like, you talk about the smokes, maybe that's what someone gave them, It's true.
It's
just something that like after we were discussing it, and I believe Steven kind of started really diving into that portion of it that I just talked about, I was just mind blown. I'm like, but like I've never looked at it that way. Mm-hmm. It's the judginess of like, well, they got the newest iPhone.
Right, and then you had that conversation, and so now all of a sudden at least you're thinking a little bit differently about it, which is really important.
Yeah.
So along those lines, sorry, I just want to interject a thought to maybe help us out. When you say that there's a stigma attached to it, and, they can't have iPhones, they can't have nice clothes, they can't be smoking cigarettes, they can't be drinking beer. What is it for us to judge what they're allowed to enjoy and what they're not allowed to enjoy? And granted, they don't have a whole lot of money, but what else do they have that they can enjoy because they don't have money? They can't go to a theme park and have fun. They can't go to the movies and have fun. They can't buy a nice dinner and have fun. So they're left with their vices of alcohol, cigarettes, drugs, that is more easy to come by because they don't have the money for other things that we typically enjoy, like going camping and riding and going for a drive. They can't afford that stuff, so they've got to have something else to take up their time, to have some kind of outlet to have joy in their life. Otherwise, to me, they'll be in a depressive state and will just increase our suicide rates.
Right. Well, and truthfully, like, my knowledge of money management and savings and budgeting and all of that may not be your family's. It may not be your knowledge. And so, sorry, I'm going in and out. Why should I expect you or you or you to bank or save or live exactly the same way as me? Like, but I do, right? You have that experience. Well, I know what I could blah, 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 blah. So why aren't you? Well, because you're not me. Like, that's the long and short of it. And that's all you need to know.
That's really true.
Yeah.
Hey, so where do you guys get your funding?
Speaking of money.
I ask everybody.
We are grassroots funded.
Okay.
So we just work really hard. We do lots of fundraisers throughout the year. The farmers market, the vendor fees kind of sustain us throughout the summer. We do the USDA summer feeding program, and so when we do that and we track properly and we do the right amounts that the USDA says we have to do for every meal, then we get reimbursed on that, but it's not a lot. It's like $1 a meal. But, you know, I mean, it all helps. There's only 3 full-time employees, and so those folks that you just saw leaving are an AmeriCorps team, so they're pure volunteer, and they're with us for 12 weeks, and then we'll have another team that comes as soon as they're done for the rest of the summer.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, so I like to say we're scrappy and we work really hard, and that's really tricky too sometimes when you see other organizations that are nonprofits and you look at their budgets and you're just like, oh my gosh, if I had blah 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 to spend on that, I'd be... But we don't, right? It comes back to the whole, like, this is how Food for Thought operates. This is how this nonprofit operates, just like households. So if I ran every nonprofit, then they would all look the same. But, I mean, then where's that solution like we were talking about earlier? Like, there's a reason that there are so many nonprofits, because they each fill a different niche. And even though, like, our mission maybe sounds similar to, like, Joshua's or Wyoming Food Bank of the Rockies or Casper Community Greenhouse Project, the way that we're doing it is different. And that's really, I think, important, that we're all working toward this collective goal. But there's, like, 70,000 people in Natrona County, and this one little urban farm is not going to take care of everyone. But hopefully it'll empower our community, it'll engage kids, it'll teach people what a strawberry looks like on the vine. So, there was a weekend food bag program in Natrona County, but the school district had been running it in partnership with a different organization, and it wasn't working as well as they wanted it to work for a lot of different reasons. And so the universe kind of like said, here, you're going to do this thing. And so I called the school district and I said, hey, you know, I know that you're thinking about dropping the program. Please don't. At that time, my son was 3 and my daughter had just started kindergarten, right? So I had this direct understanding of like what a kid in school needs. And so we said, we think we can do it. $5 a bag is what they were paying, and we were like, we think we can do it for $5 a weekend as well. And so we committed to a breakfast, lunch, and dinner item for every day a kid was out of school. We wanted it to be as healthy as possible, shelf stable, easy to prepare, kid friendly. So for most parents, after they have kids, right, they're like, my kid's never going to eat non-organic food. They're always going to eat whole food. They're all, you know, you have all of these, like, my kid's going to have the most perfect diet on the face of the earth. And you also really learn, at least I did as a parent, that like crap food is very, very easily accessible. Like you can find Oreos, you can find M&Ms anywhere. But finding good and healthy food, things that not only like feed your body but feed your soul, are a lot harder to come by. And if you live in poverty, they're really hard to come by. Like if you have food stamps and you're trying to stretch that, and you're looking at, you know, a bag of apples for $4, or, you know, a case of ramen for $4. 48 things of ramen is about, I think it's about $4. Like, which are you going to choose? And I eat ramen, but at the same time, like, if that's all you're eating and you're not having that access and you're not having that balance of a diet, like, what happens? And so Food for Thought was really driven by this desire to empower every single kid in our community to have access to fresh and healthy food. And so we started with our weekend food bags, and then we quickly took over the downtown Casper Farmers Market. And we were like, oh, this is perfect. We're going to meet all these local growers and producers. They're going to have all this local food, and our kids are just going to have the best food ever. And then we quickly learned that in Natrona County, there's not a lot of food producers. And if they are, they're already tapped out because there's such a demand for their product. And so there weren't like thousands of extra pounds of produce that were just sitting in a field going to waste because there was already demand for it. And so we're like, all right, well, so what's plan B, right? So we weren't going to give up the market, because the market to us is an opportunity to create this solution. So when we took it over, there weren't that many local growers and producers. Well, how do we create a market where there are more local growers and producers? So we did things like promoting a community table, where if you have a garden and you have excess tomatoes and your neighbors are like, if you bring me one more tomato, I'm going to throw it at you, right? Like that happens. You can bring it to the market, and for a small fee of like $5, you can sell off the community table.
Oh, so you literally are just turning just ordinary, you know, if I had a garden, I could just literally just show up and sell my stuff. I don't have to be this huge farm.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So we were trying to think about, like, we know there's excess produce, right? But it's not a huge farm. It's your neighbor with 4,000 zucchini, or it's tomatoes, or whatever the case may be. So we knew, like, there was that food in our community. So we were trying to think about, how do you get it out of your neighborhood, right, and out to the community at large. And so we instituted the community table. And then we also got accepted, we were the first market in Wyoming to get accepted to take SNAP payments, which is food stamps.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so we really wanted to create a market where everyone from any neighborhood, any socioeconomic status, could come and actually buy something and afford it, you know, and participate. And so Cassandra Baker, my other half, I call her, my right-hand gal, who's a left-hander, she researched what was working in other states, and there's this program in Michigan called Double Up Food Bucks. So Double Up Food Bucks is where if you spend money, your SNAP tokens at the market on produce, you get Double Up Food Bucks up to whatever you spent, and then you can buy more produce. So it's essentially free money, or it's an incentive to go to the market to buy produce with your SNAP cards. So we've been doing that for 5 years, and we get sponsors to offset that cost. But you come to our market and you get your SNAP tokens, and you spend up to $20 on produce, you get $20 extra at that market to spend on more produce.
That's great.
Yeah, and then we have a pop club, and that's also part of the farmers market, and it's for kids. And so kids can come and they do a little activity, and they do a taste test of, like, herbs or greens or whatever's in season. And then if they take 2 bites, they get $2 to spend on produce at the club or at the market. So that's called Pop Club.
Really?
And, for free. Again, all you have to do is try the produce, and you get $2. So that's another way that we're trying to incentivize folks coming to the market. And then we have this urban farm, and we've been here for 5 years. So before we were here, our first office was downtown in the old Hillcrest Water Building. It's now a church, but at the time it was just a hot mess of a building. But it was what we had at the time. And there was a planter out front. And so we had a day of service with Reliant Federal Credit Union, and they wanted to do something. And so we were like, well, here's all these people. Let's turn this planter into a food is free bed. And our landlord was so funny, because we were like, we need to put a water spigot in. And he was like, for what? And so we told him, and he's like, well, what if people steal the food? And we're like, well, they can't steal it because it's free.
That's kind of the point.
Right. And then he was like, well, what if they take a shower in the water spigot? And I was like, if they need to take a shower that bad, like, let them take a shower. Just don't do it when I'm there. So it's really interesting, the education that we've had to do in our community about, like, our food is free vets, right? Because we still get people like, what's the catch? Wait, do I have to sign something? Do I have to justify the need? I'm like, do you want a strawberry? Well, yeah, pick the strawberry. There you go. But what we've seen in our community historically is that most places of service that are helping homeless or at risk or people in poverty are often funded with funds that they have to justify, right?
Right.
So they
it's
have
always
to.
a huge process, right?
Right, exactly. So there's a barrier to get the funding for the organization, and then once they have it, there are barriers for the people that have to access those services, right? So they have to, like, prove that they've been unemployed, or prove that they only make this much money, or prove that this many people live in their household. Like, there are all of these issues. Yeah, criterias, right? And I mean, when we have to start justifying the need for something, like, you start removing the dignity of people, right? And so then it becomes like an us versus them. And at Food for Thought, we're like, no. Ron Finley is the gangster gardener from South Central LA. A huge, huge inspiration to us. He's amazing. He has a TED Talk. I've got it memorized. You should watch it. Got a little language in it, so maybe if your kids, maybe don't let them watch it, but check him out. He's amazing. He actually got a subpoena, and he was going to have to go to jail in LA because they have those parkways, the place between the sidewalk and the street. That you have in lots of neighborhoods. Well, he decided to grow food in his, and LA fined him because he wasn't supposed to grow food in his parkway, even though he's responsible for maintaining it. Right. So that's why he's called the gangster gardener. But he was
breaking all the rules.
Right? He went out one night, and somebody was like picking something, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, I'm sorry." He's like, "No, you don't understand. Like, I'm growing this for you. You don't have to be ashamed. Like, food should be free, especially in LA where everything grows, right? So, you know, we're looking at folks like him and like Will Allen in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, another person, Alice Waters in San Francisco, like people who have led the way and who have really just paved the way for like growing food. It's not a big deal. And that everyone deserves access to good and healthy food. It shouldn't be a like, well, if you make this much money, then you can have healthy food. Because when you go to food banks around here, and not just here, nationwide, but traditionally food banks have been an at least place, right? So at least it's something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we don't use that phrase here. We just don't like it. It's not okay with us. We want everyone who comes to feel dignity, to access, to feel accepted, to just feel community, right? I mean, that's the other thing. Like, I don't know how much money my neighbor makes. I don't really care, but I do care that they feel like I'm a good neighbor and they're a good neighbor.
So you kind of took away the, you made it like a no questions asked kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, where people can feel comfortable coming in and grabbing something and not having to like find all these documents to, you know, prove that they are worthy of getting this benefit.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
That's a good idea. I like that.
Do you think Jesus ever walked up and was like, I'll help you if you can justify your need?
If you can fill out these forms.
Right. Like, what's your income again? Oh, I'm sorry, you make too much. I can't help you.
Yeah.
You know.
And it was interesting. We were just having a talk before you rolled up about, you know, people that donate food and stuff. You know, you talk about dignity. Like, you know, how many people just say, oh, this has been in, you know, Stephen brought it up. Like, this has been in my cupboard for 2 years.
Right.
Yeah, it's out of date, but, you know, hey, it's food.
Right.
But,
they should be thankful.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, but is that being a good, like, person helping someone out in need because you're just giving them your crap food and your expired food? You know, the dignity of
for
it.
Sure.
You know, like, you know, yeah, they're people too that may have just fell in hard times. We don't know their circumstances. So.
All right. So the Good Food Hub is an 11,000 square foot building, and we're going to build a 2-story greenhouse where we'll grow hydroponically on site. And then we're going to have a culinary training program for these folks we've been talking about all evening for upward mobility and job training. And then we will, do you guys want to meet the girls, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay. Girls, girls, girls! Then we will do 3 kitchens, commercial kitchens, that people can rent by the hour. And really that Good Food Hub was spurred by the bus, by the need to have a commercial kitchen. And we walked into that building, and I was kind of speculative. I'm like, yeah, we'll go look at it. And we walked in and we were just kind of like, oh, this could totally work.
Yeah.
So it'll have a coffee bar, a juicery, it'll have a grocery store, it'll have public market stalls where like Maggie with Grab and Go Gourmet can have her deli if she wants. If you wanted a fishmonger or like someone to come in and make, you know, jams and jellies and other things, like she could have a stall. And then we'll sell their stuff in the grocery store and also on the bus. And then the hope is for a lot of our vendors right now who can't afford a commercial kitchen space, right? They're doing everything in their homes.
Yeah.
That they'll be able to come use it and expand their businesses. And then, you know, sell to restaurants and other grocery stores, and all of a sudden have a home-owned business that can actually support their family. So we're partnering with UW Business Incubator here in town. I don't know the official name, but they're going to do some entrepreneur boot camps for us. So they'll teach people how to take their idea from dream to reality. And, you know, we're on Endow's radar, and so they're liking what we're doing with urban ag and local ag. And so we're just really trying to partner with lots of people and build Wyoming's economy far beyond the whole oil and gas boom or bust thing, and give people bootstraps.
Jamie, that's huge. That's awesome.
Thanks. Yeah, it's kind of giant. You're right. You guys ever held chickens before?
I probably when I was little.
I don't know.
Sure.
I'm a big baby.
Okay, just put your hand under her chest.
Okay.
There you go. And just hold her close.
Oh,
there
wow.
you go. There you go.
I'm a huge baby.
Are you scared?
Wow, that's cool.
So everything we do here is not just like for fun. Like, we're really trying to demonstrate to the community how easy and simple it is to grow your own food. But you have to have things like good soil. So we grow our own soil here. We go to Frontier and get their beer mash. We go to a whole bunch of different coffee shops and pick up their coffee grounds every day. And we have about 200 community garden beds all across Casper. And then we'll be adding some more at the Roosevelt High School as well. It's a place for pollinating bugs to come and rest. So it's not for honeybees.
You guys have like a drop box on the other side, right? Where
yeah, do you want to go see that really quick?
Where people can drop food off or can come pick it up.
Tomatillas. Here's some red salsa made from our vegetables. Here you go. Take them home. Try them.
I can have them?
Yes, you can each have one.
Oh wow, thank you.
You're welcome.
So much.
I will do red, I don't do greens.
Okay, are you sure?
Yeah.
There you go.
I love red salsa.
Okay. It's mild, it doesn't have heat, but it has depth.
Come on.
You can add your own heat. I'm a green go.
And everything in this came out of, like, out there.
Most everything.
So about how many people do you have that are in need that come and visit here?
I have no idea.
You have no idea.
Because I don't have a video camera and I don't track it. This is what I know. Oftentimes, the day before the market, when we're like, oh, we're gonna take that zucchini, by the time we go to pick it, it's gone.
Okay.
So the neighborhood knows that this garden exists and people are picking from it.
I mean, I know you want to say that if somebody wants it, that they should have it, but do you ever think that people who have things are taking it and it's taken away from people who actually need it?
Yes, but it's not my place to judge.
Right.
And I just have to keep telling myself that.
Okay.
Because sometimes there are neighbors or other people that come and you're like, do you really need that much? But you don't know, you know?
Right.
And it's like, well, it's just food.
That's true.
It's not like they're taking the roof out over my head or my children's, you know, whatever. Like, it's just food and we're growing it for people. So as long as it's getting eaten, is it really my place? You know, that kind of goes against our core values of justify the need.
That's very true. And,
so sometimes I have to check myself, though.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And be like, wait, what do I believe in? Oh, yeah, that. Okay.
That's an awesome check for me. So
you're really promoting in North Casper, especially, you're really promoting healthy eating, healthy living kind of habits to instill in some of these children that are maybe just getting some of the pasta meals. Because I want to say when I was in college, I learned something about like people that are on EBT and stuff, they get what they call the pasta belly or something like that. And so this kind of helps counterbalance that because it instills that healthiness back in their body and gets them the nutrients and nourishments that they may desire and need that they're not getting, which is really great, you know.